Well, hello, welcome to Nashville Savvy. I'm your host, Megan Lee Petitlick from the Pamphleteer. I hope you guys are having a good Monday. We're going to start out this week by doing a little bit of a rundown of things that happened towards the end of last week. And we're doing it in a little bit different way where we're just kind of doing the news rundown, and you could follow along on that little what would you call this? Just like this little ticker on the side here. So that's the new way we're going to be doing Nashville Savvy. So hopefully it's easier to follow along as we get updated on the news here in Metro and Tennessee. So first, the birds and the bees. Last week we heard all about the purple martins that are about to start scouting to roost in downtown Nashville, which have been they make a mess downtown, especially near the Symphony. And it's been a long battle between the Symphony building that is made out of Indiana limestone and is very difficult to clean because they can't use certain acids and stuff on it to clean off bird droppings that have been occurring because of these purple martins that roost down there. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of these, I don't know, maybe even thousands of these birds when they come and roost. And so a couple of years ago, they attempted to redirect these birds to perhaps pick another place to roost, and they removed a bunch of trees. Well, apparently that hasn't worked. So now Metro is moving 12 more or so trees that are near the Symphony to try to divert the birds from nesting near the Symphony Center. And it's just a hilarious thing that keeps happening. Meanwhile, the bees in Tennessee are faring a little bit better by their overlords, their municipal overlords. That last week we did hear a bill in the Senate that would actually make it a felony if you steal bee apiary, other beekeeping equipment in colonies. And there was some interesting, hilarious pushback online calling it ridiculous that, of course, the GOP, they just want to make everything a felony because felons can't vote. And this is like some big conspiracy to get more people to get felonies so they can't vote in Tennessee. And the truth of the matter is this has been a problem. These honey heists, or if you want to call them, or hive runners, or what they call themselves, they have been an issue since, well, definitely since before the pandemic, but it really came to a head during the pandemic when you saw people starting to steal people's bees and their hives and their colonies and all of their hive tool that they spend thousands and thousands of dollars on. And these are no joke. You can't just walk in and steal an entire beehive. These things can be upwards of, they could be between 40 and 100 pounds, and you're stealing multiple cases with colonies in them. And you have to have some type of plan to go in with the type of equipment to be able to walk away or drive away with all of this. Last year or 2 years ago, we had one heist that was of it just from one place that they hit. It was over $15,000 in equipment. Usually theft that's, anything over $1,000 is a felony. So it's just something to try, and especially because these are technically like livestock. I know that they feel like little livestock. It's not like somebody killing or damaging your cow or stealing your cow or whatever, but it's definitely something that people have invested in. Whether it be that they're investing in trying to save the bees, which is something that happens around here, is that we're trying to save some of the bee hives in those colonies because of the shortage of bees and they're such important pollinators, or just because they are making them money through honey, baby. And I will say this also has deep roots. One of the gentlemen who had his bees stolen from him, it was a beehive that had been in his family since the mid 1800s. It had lived in their house since the 1800s. He started to move the colony over and make sure that they had everything that they needed, especially during deep freezes. And so stealing that colony from him was stealing a piece of his family's history. And it's just, I'm glad to see that they're hopefully trying to crack down a little bit more, make it people a little bit more weary to just walk in and steal bees from people's farms. So those are the birds and the bees, but we're also going to go into a couple other things that have to do with state animals and vaccines. So we've been seeing a bill. It's SB 2543 and HB 2801. This is Halsey And nicely, of course, we usually get a bunch of agricultural bills from Nicely that we see that we like. And this would be about labeling vaccinated livestock. So um, basically, there are multiple farms in Tennessee who do not vaccinate their meat, their livestock that is meant to eventually become um, packaged as meat product for people. They don't vaccinate it. At least they don't mRNA vaccinate it. They'll do the traditional vaccines, but not the new genetic modification vaccines. And this is just a bill that would allow for if it exempts livestock and poultry products and producers who don't want to vaccinate their animals from the orders of the Commission of the Agricultural or State Veterinarian to require vaccines. So what we've been hearing from the Farm Bureau and from a couple other people during these discussions is that when you have an outbreak, say we have a swine flu or bird flu outbreak, they do want to be able to regulate the meat and regulate whether or not it's been vaccinated. Now, during these discussions, it's come to the attention of the bill writers that perhaps they needed to add an amendment, which we've seen an amendment that might be added to this bill that would basically make it so that you would have to label whether or not your meat was vaccinated in certain ways. Like if it had been vaccinated for, say, the state vet is requiring a vaccine for this swine flu that's coming swine flu. You would have to either label it, and it might have something to do with being able to sell outside of the state. So you might have to label it within your state, and you might not be able to do any interstate commerce if you're one of the farms that didn't vaccinate your livestock with whatever the new mRNA vaccine is or whatnot. So this has been a contentious topic because it has become a market where people don't want an mRNA vaccinated meats, and they're going out of their way to buy it. There's definitely a market for these types of meats. So that's a bill that we're watching because we keep seeing different conversations come up. The push and pull on that bill is really interesting. Also, sometimes that the perfect becomes the enemy of the good with some of these bills. We've been watching the easement bill that was put together. Originally, it was suggested by the governor's office, and we saw that last week, the House is continuing to go forward with the state easement bill. Basically, the idea of the easement bill would be that they would put together some type of state fund that you can basically send a petition to become part of if you want to put your farm in an easement to protect farmland in Tennessee. There is a 15-year term that you would have to be part of the easement. That would be like the easement agreement as of right now. And in the Senate, they basically shut this bill down. They've closed a committee that it would have to go through, and it sounds like Sutherland, that's the committee chairman, might not be willing to reopen it, which means that this bill would be dead on arrival. So this is one of the governor's bills that might just die because the Senate will not reopen the committee. But in the House, they're still pushing it through. And we heard Rusty Grills, who's the rep, he was the one who's co-sponsoring this and has been talking a lot about it during the discussions in certain committees. And Bud Halsey, who was very weary of this legislation, did address a lot of the issues that people who are pushing back against these easements brought forward those issues that they're afraid of. One of them being that he fussed about the language of the servient, and Rusty Grills and the bill sponsors, they changed the wording to appease Halsey as far as the servient language in the bill. He also didn't want any government money tied into this. He didn't want state money to be transferred from, okay, now it's just a state funded thing, to now we're matching it with federal grants, to now the federal government's in charge of it. He didn't want something like that to happen, so they fixed some of that language. They didn't want there to be any selling or transferring of the state, or the state divesting itself from this program in the future and handing it over to the federal government. And they fixed all of that. The only thing that they didn't really address is that 15-year term agreement. But for his sake, this is something that Bud Halsey said it took a great deal of fear out of a whole lot of people's hearts that are his constituents who are worried about this bill. And the truth of the matter is that this bill is only a state-funded easement. And there's a lot of things that we could talk about when it comes to protecting farmland. We have private entities building up and developing farmland. We have private entities also buying and kind of hoarding farmland. We've seen Chinese investment in Tennessee land. I know that Donald Trump has bought some land. I know that Bill Gates has bought some land. We have Al Gore buying land. Sometimes when it comes to the preservation of the farmland in the state, this is just one option that the governor put forward that could potentially help protect land. Sometimes the perfect can become the enemy of the good. Of course, people are extremely afraid of this like 30 by 30 initiative where the government is basically trying to confiscate, render land unusable and confiscate certain amounts of land. But in the short term, this could also be something really good that could help small farms not have to sell off their land to these private entities to have it developed or to have it hoarded by, these monopolies of big money players in the state. But anyways, we're going to continue to hear some more about that because they keep going back and forth about this bill, and we might see it pop back on in the Senate this week. And if it does, that'll be crazy. So I'll keep you guys updated as far as that goes on Twitter. But also something that might be, the perfect becoming the enemy of the good is the state sovereignty bill. Well, it kind of started as the perfect becoming the enemy of the good. There were two state sovereignty bills that we brought up last week. One of them had just had an opinion from the AG's office that basically said it was constitutionally infirm, kind of questioning whether it was a constitutional bill and if the AG's office would be able to defend it if they got sued over passing this legislation. Basically, the bill was setting up what could possibly become a nullification process if there is federal overreach, some type of statute or law or mandate that's set by the federal government that our state is like, okay, that's not your job. Like, we have state sovereignty, we have state rights, and now you're overstepping those boundaries. We're not following that. We're nullifying this rule. Because of the fact that it was questioned by the AG's opinion as to whether or not it was constitutional, the discussions kind of took a turn towards perhaps maybe being a little bit more contentious, where there was another state sovereignty bill that wasn't deemed unconstitutional or potentially unconstitutional. So it kind of pitted the two state sovereignty bills against each other, even though all of these Republicans do care about the same types of things. So it really came to a head last week. And I think it was the week before, and we wrote about it last week, where in the committee, the sponsor of the Senate bill that was kind of deemed potentially unconstitutional agreed to let it to go to summer study, where they're going to really take their time going through the bill, seeing some of the things that they might want to address, especially about state sovereignty, and perhaps bringing it back next year a little bit more refined and with some ideas of how they want to go forward with protecting states' rights. And interestingly enough, this might end up being, if they end up getting over the whole, competing state sovereignty bills thing, we might be seeing the dream team of states' rights kind of coming out of this discussion. Because once the smoke settled and the dust settled and the smoke cleared, everybody just wants to work towards getting and reestablishing our state sovereignty and our states' rights as accordance to the Constitution. And this is something that everybody can agree with in. And so I hope that eventually turns into this collaborative movement where everybody starts to work together instead of working in their own corner and trying to snuff out other people's state sovereignty bills when they can really work together. It was a wonderful show during the committee meeting the other week, because it did kind of air some of this out. So I'm excited to see what happens. But if they can't get over the fact that multiple people have different ideas about what this should look like and they can't work together, then we're going to see the perfect becoming the enemy of the good. Same thing with so many other bills that happen in this state. So we'll keep an eye on that. So I also want to do a Metro update today. We're going to talk about the East Bank first, because last Friday I sat down during the media roundtable and talked to Bob Mendez, who is now the development director in Metro. If you don't recall, he used to be a council member, and now under Freddie O'Connell, he is now appointed as the director of the development department. So he's been all on top of the East Bank. The funny thing is he did our media roundtable on Friday, and I left there feeling like he said a bunch of nothing. So I don't know if I know more or less than I knew before about how things are going with the East Bank development process. But I do know this, a couple of things that are kind of new that I didn't really put together. Today, we're going to be hearing about a bill that they're trying to pass through the state legislature right now, which would create a authority, basically the East Bank Development Authority. It would be made up of 7 board members. They would kind of turn into the overseeing arm that looks over the East Bank development, including the Titan Stadium area. And it would be made up by people who are picked by the mayor and the council. Of course, this entire conversation has been laced with skepticism from both sides of the aisle. For one, the state and Metro have wrestled over different authorities that have jurisdiction and power over things that are within Davidson County. So we don't really know if this is going to go over well with the council. We don't know if it's going to make it through the state legislature, and we don't know if it's going to make it through the council. That's something I discovered on Friday, that it does have to, even if it passes at the state level, it might not pass through Metro. And if it doesn't pass through Metro, then we're going back to the drawing board, apparently. But we don't have that much synergy between the state and the Metro municipality here in Davidson County. Not sure if either, both, one or the other may or may not pass this authority to come into existence. 2, the state has invested they invested $500 million to help develop and create this deal with the Titan Stadium and the East Bank. And they're not going to have any stake in who's on the board. They're just going to let the council and the mayor pick who's on the board, who makes all of these executive decisions. That has bothered some people. Also, some stuff that has come up, and we saw some lawsuits that were released today, like some information that was released about them by the Tennessean today, about eminent domain. A lot of the language in this is basically talking about the 550 acres that make up the East Bank and how it's all owned by Metro. But they also have investment. They will have vested interests in the things that are developed around this East Bank development. We're already seeing apparently potentially them slow walking the permitting process to some of the development near the East Bank, which is obviously an influence. They're trying to potentially influence the process of the development of the parcels of land that aren't owned by Metro, but are surrounding what's going to be the new East Bank. So some people are looking at this authority. They're afraid of this eminent domain type of issue becoming a problem, especially if they want to develop something that they already have that just happens to be around this East Bank development area, or if they want to try to build something new, bigger, something that would kind of match the idea of what the East Bank is turning into. Will this authority get in the way of that? Are they going to basically just be like, no, you can't do anything. The only thing that you could do is keep it as it is, or let us buy it from you. So those are a couple issues that people have been voicing today in the afternoon. We will be hearing more from this bill in the House, so you could pay attention. I think the meeting is at 3, but Bob Mendez said it best. He was like, when I asked him, basically, do you think that the council is going to be behind it? Say the state passes it. Do you think the council is going to pass it too? And he said, I'm not going to do the brain damage of thinking about where we're at with the council until we find out whether it's even authorized under state law. So he said on Friday. He also told us that Metro is going to develop the East Bank, whether an authority is created or not. And we've got several options that we've looked at, but that they think that the authority is the best for them. I got the vibe that from Mendez, and I've gotten this vibe this is just my own insight. It might be false, so take it for what it is. But also talking to Freddie O'Connell about this, it sounds like they want professionals who are dedicated to overseeing this development. They don't want to turn into a tit for tat. They want to give this authority to the East Bank Development Authority. They don't want the council going back and forth with the state about what's going on in the East Bank development. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some amendments pop up on this bill that changes a little bit of its language, especially because of all the pushback against it. That being said, if the language changes and the council just doesn't want to pass it, then I guess we just won't have an authority, or we'll have to wait on some other idea. I did try to ask Mendez if they had a contingency plan if it didn't pass at the local level or at the state level. And he really is just taking it one step at a time, not getting ahead of anything. So I don't know what their contingency plan is here, except for, well, they're still going to go forward with the development. I also asked a little bit about the stormwater, because I know that the Army Corps of Engineers are in charge of kind of looking at where the development's going to fall as far as the flood zone lines on the East Bank over there. I live right near the east where all this development's going on. I know that the water levels come up real high over here. So when I was asking Bob Mendez a little bit about that, he said that about a year ago, the Army Corps of Engineers did give some type of preliminary outline, like a map that, okay, if you build, you could build here, here, and here, and here's like the line where you can't build because of the flood zone or floodplain. I'm not really certain. I know there's a difference between the two. Somebody smarter than me could add it in the comments, but it sounded to me like it wasn't set in stone. And it sounded to me also, when Mendez was answering the question, that it could potentially change. They could come back, do some more studies, especially as density keeps increasing and things keep changing as far as our floodplains in this part of Davidson County, that they could come back and change those lines. So they're creating all these plans to develop the East Bank. It's going to take like 25 years to develop it, but they're going forward with it anyways. They're about to break ground on this new Titans Stadium. Well, they did break ground, but they're about to like really put the effort in over here. We're going to watch it go up in the next 2 to 3 years. And then we're going to watch the East Bank development slowly turn into some type of something over here that people still don't really, I don't think, fully grasp. And the Army Corps of Engineers could decide to push up that flood zone. So they could have a plan and the plan can completely change. So it's a day by day. It just sounds like they're taking it one day at a time with the East Bank development. And so I really did walk away from that feeling like, okay, well, I don't really know if I got a lot of new answers out of that meeting, but I think that they were trying to just deal with one thing at a time over there. We also saw the transit maps released by Freddie O'Connell last week. He had, I think it was 7 maps that he released that would have to do with the transit referendum. And I don't know, guys, his office said to release them, they were for immediate release, but I feel like the maps didn't help. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like they might have done more harm than good. They're conceptually, they really don't make that much sense when you're looking at them. Okay, so now we have the transparency of seeing where some of these bus routes will go, some of where the rapid bus routes are going to be. It kind of just looked like a spider web of trying to be able to bus people from the outer corners of Nashville to come work in downtown Nashville and not have to drive their cars. Of course, how much of that just feels like social engineering, and how much of it feels like they don't really, who is this really serving, you know? And I just talked to a transit engineer over the weekend who lives and works out of Arizona near Scottsdale. And when I was talking to her about it, she let me know a little bit about their introduction. They had like a light rail system, and how people were really not, when the Scottsdale basically rejected it coming to their city because they were afraid of, they didn't think that they would use it. They were afraid of what it would bring in. And it just goes to show you that no matter where you're at, if people aren't using it already, if they don't want to use it, and you're looking at the maps and you're really not sure, who is this going to help? If it's there, will more people use it? If it's there, will they ride? Are we just taking a risk we're just placing a bet on Freddie O'Connell and his vision here? Probably. So I don't know if I'm completely convinced that the maps helped. I think it just made it a little bit more confusing. Of course, we're going to hear more of the full referendum and what they're going to do coming up here at the end of the month is when they should be releasing after they do all the rest of the community meetings. We'll know what exactly we're going to be voting on in November. So I guess we could keep an eye on that. But I just wanted to talk about that. You can check them out on the Nashville website, and I think I added them somewhere on Twitter. So those are the transit maps. Lastly, we're just going to do a very quick council preview here. So tomorrow, it looks like a really straightforward agenda. We don't have anything too pressing. We don't have our public hearings. We will have a public comment period, but it's limited. And we are not dealing with any of the zoning bills until next month. So you're not going to see the zoning stuff, like the Nest stuff, until April 2nd, I believe is the date. So tomorrow you're really just going to see one East Bank bill on second reading. We might see some robust discussion about that because it's kind of like the agreements, the public-private partnership agreements between the developers and Metro Nashville, which is very interesting. So we might see some conversation about that. But honestly, I don't think that there's going to be that many hot discussions, like heated discussions during the council meeting, which will be refreshing because we need a break from everything that's going on with with the Nest stuff. So I'm putting my guess on maybe we'll wrap somewhere like 9:15, or 3 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes to 3 hours. I could be wrong here, but that's what I'm guessing for tomorrow. So I will be doing a review on that on Wednesday. If you guys don't have the time to tune in and you just want to, that's why I am here. I can do that for you when you don't have the time or if you don't want to. And so the only other thing I could think of that would have any interest, they would be of interest during the committee meeting tomorrow, or the council meeting, is that Courtney Johnston, who is one of the council members, she just came out with a quote saying that she might be running for the congressional seat in District 5 against Andy Ogles, which is super interesting. The last I know Johnson has been ambitious and was potentially thinking about running for mayor someday, but I'm kind of surprised that she came out saying that she might throw her hat in the ring to run for District 5. What would be interesting, I think that she might have just put this, I will have to call and ask her and see if I could get a quote from her, but I think that she's just putting her feelers out there to see if anybody would be interested, if she could actually raise the money to do it. She's kind of known as a more moderate Republican. She has worked with a very progressive council for many years and has seemingly been one of the farther right people, but she really has come forward with a lot of common sense policy, and so she hasn't ruffled too much. I mean, she pisses off some people in there because she is just very common sense, but she hasn't ruffled too many feathers and she hasn't burned too many bridges. So I'll be interested to see if she really feels like she has a shot, how she'll end up using council and her time during council meetings on the floor to platform herself, because usually she won't go too far outside the bounds. She's very pragmatic, very steady and straightforward with how she explains things on the floor. But if she's running against Annie Ogles and she's still a council member, she might end up using her status as a council member that gets, time to talk to people on the floor about issues. She might use that platform. And so that might be interesting to see for the future. So we'll be watching her and see if she makes that decision to actually jump on the actual ballot for District 5. But that's basically the lowdown for the rest of the week. I hope that, we start to wrap up some of what's going on in General Assembly. So I'll be trying to keep track of what I actually think is potentially going to make it through all the way to the end of this year's session. before we go, I'm going to pull up the same scavenger hunt from last week. So this is meant to be fun, and I know that it's going to be difficult, and I know that we don't have as many viewers because we're not, in a international sensation yet, guys, here at Nashville Savvy. But this is the little guy, the little broccoli. It's hiding somewhere, and now I'll tell you, it's on my side of the river. So it's in East Nashville somewhere. So this is like the new added amount of information. It's hiding somewhere in East Nashville. It's been there for years and years and years. If you want to check out another clue, you could go onto my Twitter. We have it pinned to the top, and I'm going to be adding periodically different clues. There's a little rhyme that kind of puts a context of where this could be. And the first person who guesses it right, I'm going to give a $20 certificate to the place that it's hiding for either an appetizer or a cocktail. So put your guesses in, and hopefully somebody will win, or we're just going to keep looking at this piece of broccoli until somebody gets it. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Stay informed. Have a good week.